We have got Jill Soley here. Jill, I guess I must have met you in 2014 or 2015 when Freshworks threw a party and there were like 30 people. I mean, it was really small, and I think Freshworks went public like a year ago or something, or
No, a few weeks ago.
a few weeks ago. Oh my God, yeah. So this is just like everything's happening in fast forward. But I really was drawn to a lot of work that you were doing both back then on the product and product marketing side, and then more on the marketing side, and then read your book, Beyond Product, which we'll be buying copies of for the cohort here. And just for everyone's context, Jill is an award-winning producer, product manager, marketer, kind of has that unique blend of skill sets that kind of crosses from the technical into the straight up marketing side. And you've built and scaled companies. I'm sure you'll share a little bit about your bio, but Jill came in and did a talk for, I think it was either the first or second cohort. And we're lucky enough to have her back this time. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out. Really appreciate your time here. And we'll have plenty of time afterwards, everybody, for questions and answers. And I think you'll learn a lot from how Jill thinks about this. And we'll plug the book at the end as well. But I'll turn it over to you, Jill. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk for a little bit and kind of share some stories and stuff, and then this time is yours if you've got questions. So I want to talk about marketing today. And some of you may be feeling I'm really early. I'm still sort of validating. I'm just beginning to build whatever, like marketing that's down the road when I'm ready to launch, whatever. But hear me out. There's a reason I want to talk about marketing. And I'm guessing most of you are not marketers by background. I may be very wrong, but in my experience, certainly in the Valley, and I know you're sort of from all over the place. A lot of the founders are technical, and that's in particular as someone who's sort of crossed over product roles and marketing roles. I think it's really important. There are some basics that founders really need to understand. So why marketing? Let's see if this works. Hold on a second. No, I have to.
And I'll probably pull the audience a little bit along the way. That's a great question. I'm actually curious about this cohort. If anybody here actually does consider themselves a marketer at core, but we're mostly founders. Founders, co-founders, and early employees.
Yeah. Well, but everyone comes from somewhere, right? Right. You've got some kind of a background in something. And the question is sort of what that is, right? So hopefully, you've seen this statistic, right? Because hopefully you all know what you're walking into, right? Here's the reality of what you're doing today. 70 to 90%, depending on what study you believe, 70 to 90% of startups fail, right? And talk about definition of failure or whatever. But the point is, you're all probably really smart, educated, you have a lot of experience, et cetera, right? You're doing something absolutely crazy right now, right? Most fail. And over the years, right? Like I've been watching, and I've been working with some of these startups to try and understand sort of, well, why are they failing? And there have been a few studies about why. And this is one that I found really interesting. It's a few years old at this point, but they've done some more in-depth research since then. This CB Insights a few years ago, they looked at the postmortems from 100 founders whose startups had failed. And they kind of divided it out. And what they found was that 42%, right, dangerously close to half, said there was no market need for the product that they had built or were building, right, for the business that they were starting. So they had maybe gotten investor money, they'd spent countless hours, et cetera, like sleepless nights, hired people, whatever, and there was no need, in their estimation, for the product they were building, right? Also within that segmentation, right, 14%, they didn't do marketing very well, or they were ignoring customers, which I also kind of put in the marketing bucket, right? And this is not just a startup problem, right? This is new products within large businesses as well. Same problem, right? All of this comes back to marketing. So that's what I want to talk about, and I want to prevent your startups from falling into becoming one of those statistics. So just by quick way of background, right? I've been doing product management and marketing, mostly SaaS, mostly B2B, some mobile, et cetera, for the past 20 years. I, cut my teeth, if you will, at Siebel Systems, which was acquired by Oracle, doing CRM in the client server days. Started SaaS there. I spent years at Adobe, launching Adobe Creative Cloud and doing various other projects there, doing mobile apps, et cetera. I spent a couple of years launching, basically introducing Freshworks here in the United States and running marketing there. And I've done a bunch of startup stuff as well along the way. So some advising, consulting, and running product and marketing there. So I have some experience doing this stuff, right? Through all that experience, I saw some commonalities across the products that were failing. And that's what made me do what was probably, arguably, I'm not sure if it was the smart way to solve the problem, but it made me spend a year interviewing leaders, startup leaders, marketers, founders, investors, et cetera, to really sort of kind of put together a framework for founders, for startups around how do you avoid that failure, right? How do you take that idea that you have and get it to a successful business? And that's what Beyond Product was. So I'm going to share a couple of my, experiences and so forth, and some of what I learned in that process. So number one, so the first thing that I found really interesting as I was interviewing people, I interviewed a bunch of investors, right? From, well-known and sort of a variety of venture capital firms. And the common theme was, before you write a line of code, before you rent a space, before you hire people, et cetera, get a statistically relevant sampling of the market, right? Interview 50, 100 more potential customers, people in your market segment or who you think your market segments are, to get data points. And this is not friends and family, right? This is a common mistake, right? I talked to 10 friends and they said, oh yeah, I've got that problem too. Or, oh, that sounds great, you should totally do it, right? Really get a sampling from the market. I heard consistently this idea of stealth. There was a real question about this idea of stealth, because the startups that succeed are the ones that get the most feedback from the market. There's a great quote that I love from Andy Rachleff, who's investor, professor at Stanford, CEO, et cetera. And this kind of coalesces, right? This really sort of says it to me, right? If you address a market that really, really wants your product, right? They really have this problem. They have it so badly, right, that they need to solve it. Then you can screw up almost everything in the company. You can make other mistakes and you still have a really good chance of success. But if you execute really well on something that the market doesn't want, you're going to fail. You're doomed for failure, right? So start with the market. Do that research early on. That is the most important thing that you can do for your startup. And do that early and often. Keep validating, right? Everything else is secondary to that. And hopefully that's what you're all doing right now, if you haven't already. The other key lesson within that, and I think this is the really common mistake, is that confirmation bias is real. It is very real. You see it everywhere, right? The key, there are whole bunches of ways to reach your market, depending on who they are, right? Go to conferences, right? I realized in the past year, there haven't been as many surveys online, go to a coffee shop with, $5 gift cards, whatever, right? Like depending on who your market is. But the key is, when you go in and you are asking questions, is not to lead the witness and to go in with a mindset of trying to disprove your hypothesis, not trying to listen for the things that confirm, but to try to listen to all the reasons that you're going to fail, because those are the things that you have to solve for, right? Maybe you'll find that this is the wrong market. Maybe you'll find that there's a real barrier to adoption, right? Those are the things that you have to find early and you have to keep looking for. So, number 2, product marketing. Do you guys know what product marketing is? There's a lot of confusion around what product marketing is. So that's why I kind of want to take a minute, because this is the kind of marketing that is actually most critical for, particularly if you have a product startup early on, right? It's not necessarily sure. I mean, there's going to be PR and buzz and whatever, but What is product marketing, right? And who cares? Product marketing, I like the definition of it's about connecting your product with your market and your market with your product, right? It's not just about having a marketer launch your product when it's ready to go, but it starts much earlier than that. And it's about really understanding your market. The function is about really understanding your market so that you can build your product for your market, and you can understand how to position your product for your market. And you understand where those people are and how they think and so forth, and what they do, where to find them, how to talk to them. All of that is going to be really important at the point that you do want to launch and grow your product and your business, right? So it can include all of these things, right? It's about market research. It's about market and competitive intelligence, right? Positioning and messaging about your product, right? There is, the biggest myth in Silicon Valley is if I build it, they will come. I'm building the best thing ever. The whole world needs this, right? And it's such a great product that it's going to sell itself. And I remember at Adobe, I remember hearing the CEO say, "Yep, this product, it sells itself. We don't need sales." Well, you know what you do? You actually do. And the products, even their companies. I remember Dropbox talking to founders saying this, that they didn't do marketing. Well, they did do marketing. They just didn't call it marketing, right? So you got to be really smart about all of these things, and someone has to be doing, right, the figuring out all this stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person with the title marketer. It could be you. Maybe you're the chief cook and bottle washer, right? You could be doing this stuff, but the point is you've got to be doing this stuff early on. You can't wait till you're ready to launch your product to start thinking about marketing, right, and how to position and what your go-to-market approach is going to be, because that's the place. Even if you have a good product, that can completely tank your business. Does that make sense? So, right, the lesson there: partner with marketing now. Don't wait. Right, start this stuff now. So the third thing, I'm going to share a bit of a story. I launched at Adobe Creative Cloud, which you probably, I'm trusting, have heard of at this point, right? It was a big success, right? Like completely transformed Adobe's shrink wrap business to service and subscriptions. And when Adobe tells the story and you hear about it, right, you hear all about the success. Nobody talks about everything that happened prior to that, right? It's as if we just magically released this big thing and it was successful. I was there through the slogging of, all the things that came before Adobe Creative Cloud. And we had a big release a couple of years before called CS Live, which nobody remembers, right? Except for maybe some of the customers who had to live through it. And basically, we were trying to move from shrink wrap, right? Which was every few years, we sell these boxes and people pay us money once and they get this stuff, right? And a lot of customers wouldn't upgrade to the next one because, it was good enough, right? And trying to figure out how to move that business to services and subscriptions. So CS Live was Adobe's we dipped the toe in the water where we built some hosted services and we built them as an add-on to the boxes, to the Creative Suite, which was the collection of Photoshop and InDesign and so forth. And these hosted services, each individual service actually had a lot of value. On my team, we built one called CS Review, and it was one of I think it was 5 services that we built. And we did all the right things with Adobe CS Review. We took the engineers and the PM and the marketer, and we flew out to go see customers, and we spent time just watching them and seeing what their problems were and so forth. And built this service that by all means they needed, right? And what we were solving for was, until that point, we could only solve problems that we could solve within this box of software, right? But the reality is most of their workflow they did outside of Photoshop or outside of InDesign, right? They had a review process, right? Whenever they created something, creative professionals, whenever they created something, they had a review process with their boss or their client or whatever. And that happened outside of Photoshop and InDesign. So we created this service where They could take what they were creating in InDesign and they could share it to the cloud. I mean, all of this sort of sounds normal now. This was several years ago. They could share it to the cloud and the customer could log on and they could review it and leave their comments. And then the designer would see it inside, inside their product. And so this is just, these are some screenshots of what it looked like, what the product looked like, right? And we tested it and so forth. And so here you can see this is your InDesign product, and this is what in the middle, it's what they've designed, and then on the left, the designer can see the comments that the customers add, and they can check them off when they've corrected them and so forth. So all of that was great. The problem is we had a bunch of constraints and had within Adobe and we had a lot of battles around this stuff about some of the challenges that customers were going to face in terms of adoption. For instance, when we released it, if you look over here on the right, this is what your InDesign, for the designer, this is what their InDesign desktop looked like, right? It's really busy. There are all of these menus and there are all these tabs and all this stuff, right? And to find these hosted services, there's a little button up here in the corner, right? And if they happen to click it, then there's this list of services that they don't know what it is, right? And so like the discovery of these services in and of itself was hard, right? When we released it also with the release of the next version of Adobe Creative Suite, which Adobe puts tons of money into, right? Big splash, you see billboards, you see all kinds of ads everywhere, tons of money. So you'd think, great, there's great marketing, right? People are going to find out about it. The problem is the Creative Suite launch. We're launching, see all these chiclets here on the left, right? It's Photoshop and it's InDesign and it's After Effects and it's a whole Dreamweaver and all of these products. And these hosted services, the copy was on page 3, right? Nobody ever got there to even find the hosted services, right? So they're hard to discover. And then there were some challenges with adoption, right? Just our customers would live in these products, right? They live in Photoshop or InDesign or whatever. And so they get their new version and they're like overwhelmed. And the first thing they have to do is figure out, how do I do stuff today that I did yesterday, right? How do I do those core things that I need to do for my projects today? Then I want to figure out the new stuff, right? And then they get to the hosted services, number one. Number two, for this particular service, for example, CS Review, it was something they'd use with a client. Well, their clients had to have Adobe IDs to log into the service to use it. No client, right? They don't want to make their clients figure out an ID and log in and all that stuff, right? There were all of these barriers, right? There were barriers where our creative professionals had to get comfortable with the service and feel like, okay, I can trust, like I can use this with my client and it'll be a good experience. And then they had these extra barriers where they had to get their clients to sign in and stuff. And that was often some exec at some big company who didn't want to be bothered. And so there were a lot of barriers to adoption. When we released Adobe Creative Cloud, right, we ended up killing CS Live because of, it just in the end, like it didn't take off, no surprise. And a few years later, when we released Creative Cloud, the good news is we learned a bunch of things and we did a bunch of these things right? We flipped things around and the cloud and these hosted services were right front and center, right? In the marketing copy. Creative Cloud changes everything, right? Like we talked about the cloud and the value for the customer. We focused in on making sure, the top 3 customer needs were met in what we built. We made sure front and center that they knew the cloud was this critical part of it. And we made them come to the cloud to get their software. So they had to figure out where to go and find it. And we made it all much, much easier to discover. So the point here is that it doesn't matter how great your product is. It doesn't matter how critical a problem you solve. If customers can't find your product, if they can't find out about your product, if they can't buy your product, or if they can't use your product, right? So you've got to constantly be paying attention to all of those challenges, all of that friction around the adoption as well as the core product itself. Um, next story. And this is related to the last one. So I ran product at a startup called CloverPop for a couple of years. It was actually just acquired. Um, when Eric, the founder of CloverPop, started the company, he had this thing that he really wanted to help people with life's big decisions, right? And that's where he started in founding the company, was in these personal decisions, like, should I marry this person? Should I move across the world? Should I take this job? Should I whatever, right? And that was the core of his startup when he started his initial product. And he hit a wall, right? He was really struggling because what he found was when people make decisions, like even if they would use it and it would help them make their decision, soon as the decision was made, there's this sort of really interesting phenomenon where people just forget about it. Like they're done, right? They don't come back for whatever else, whatever. Like people even forget that they've sort of made a decision, if you will. And he had tried a bunch of business models and it wasn't quite working. And he was sort of trying to figure out what to do. The really interesting, to me anyway, critical thing that he did there is not just look at what is the problem, what's going wrong, where's the thing, where are they getting stuck? But he also looked at, well, what's going right? Because even if it's a really small, in his case, there was a really small segment of decisions that were actually going really right. And when he looked at them and sort of broke things out, what he realized is that the handful of people who were using CloverPop for business decisions were actually coming back and using it again and having a lot more success. And maybe that was something. And that was a whole different business model. So he, at that point, shifted things and turned it into an enterprise software platform. And that was at the point at which I joined. And so we sort of followed the standard, to the sort of traditional, if you can call it at this point, SaaS business model for SaaS software. And we were selling subscription software to businesses to help them make decisions and communicate decisions better. Definitely a need within corporations. But still, we were hitting a bunch of barriers to adoption and use, right? And even purchase, right? It's a long sales cycle in enterprise. People don't have budgets for decision-making software, right? Even if it's a need, right? They plan for customer support software or marketing software, but not for decision management software. And then adoption is hard, right? Getting people to change their workflow. If any of you are doing some kind of a product that changes workflow, talk to me, because I've got experience there, and that is hard. It's not impossible, but it is really hard. Anyway, so we developed a couple of tools to help us. An assessment, right, where we could help them figure out where should I focus to drive more adoption. Because if they just our customers just use it sort of generally, they had a lot of trouble with adoption. But if we help them kind of focus in, here's the thing you need to solve, here's where the pain is being felt, that helped a lot with adoption. And then we did some training, some really high value training that helped. Even so, just the model and getting people to sort of buy up front and so forth, that was challenging. But what we found, again, looking at what was going right, is the customers who were using the assessments and the training were being more successful. So again, we kind of shifted a little bit and focused and kind of the way we were thinking about and approaching the business was as a decision practices company, right? Instead of a decision software company. And we began to upfront start with selling the diagnostic and selling the training to help these organizations. And oh, by the way, we would use the software to help with the training and so forth and help them sort of instill, kind of support these best practices we were teaching. And then we would also sell them the platform for use ongoing. And that also then helped with adoption just by kind of shifting the go-to-market approach, right? We didn't really change the software, et cetera, but changed the go-to-market approach. Still, there were some challenges, and that the biggest challenge at this point we were facing was the tool fatigue, right? Within everybody's got, I'm using Slack, I'm using email, I'm using this, I'm using that. Like going to another product, getting people to sort of open up another product to do another thing was hard. And so what really then made the difference was just building a Slack app. Our customers were in Slack, right? Slack and Teams. And so we built Slack and Teams apps. And suddenly there were many more people who were trying it and beginning to use it with their customers, right? And this made a huge difference for the company. So I take you through that from the point of like, you're not going to get it right the first time. You are not, period. Like, Craig, how often do people get it right the first time?
I mean, almost never. And like, I'm taking notes here and I'm like, the bullet points and stuff that we need to be thinking about. And we're marketers and we're iterating so quickly, but it's so true. I mean, and you really won't know, I don't think, until you put it out there. But this framework that you're walking us through is super relevant, I think, for all the companies there, but also for us.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So this is the thing, right? We talk, you probably read Lean Startup, whatever, right? Like, and we think about being agile in the product. It's product and marketing. And yes, you're probably going, well, some of this stuff is product, is it really marketing? There's so much overlap there, right? Because sometimes your go-to-market is dependent on making changes to your product, and your product success is about making changes to your marketing, your go-to-market, right? And so that's why you have to be thinking broadly, like, what is the problem and what are the different ways I can solve it? And it may or may not be a feature, right? And that's the key point there. And then kind of my last point here is, I should probably update this, but at one point I went, I used to work at Freshworks, right? In customer support software space. So at one point I just did a sort of survey and I grabbed screenshots from a bunch of websites for customer support software. And these are 5 of the ones that happened to come up, right? All your communication neatly sorted by priority. Multi-channel help desk, right? Omni-channel communication platform, right? Like, anything jump out at you, anything seem particularly interesting, they all just kind of, it's a bunch of features and functions, right? They all just kind of sound pretty much the same. When people are coming to you, right? If they're going to come to you as customers, they have a problem that they need to be solved, that they need solved, right? These are just features. Nobody cares about your features, right? Who has broken away in this space, right? Zendesk, if you look at their messaging and their marketing, right, it's very different, right? It's about providing a shortcut to happy customers. It's about creating a relationship between a company and their customers, right? That's the problem that these companies are trying to solve when they get customer support software. It's not about needing this particular feature or that particular feature. Once you've got them there, then they care. But talking about your features, you're just blah, blah, like it's like Charlie Brown's, teacher, blah, 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 right? Like nobody cares. You've got to think about, what is the customer problem, right? What are the benefits? What's the story that's going to hook them, right? So these are the questions, right? You've got to understand your customer specifically, right? I totally understand when you are pitching a VC, they want to know that you have a huge market, right? And right here is the crux of a really common problem, right? You got to pitch VCs differently than your customers. So when you're talking to a VC, this is my market that I'm going after, and it's huge, and everybody's going to need this, and here's why. But even with them, you may want to talk about, but here's where we're starting, right? With customers, if you tell this general story, it's not going to resonate. You've got to start somewhere and focus and tell a story that resonates with me. Why do I need your product? How are you going to make my life better? Right? So understanding who that target customer is, what drives them, what do they really care about? What are they trying to accomplish? What keeps me up at night, right? And how can you uniquely solve that pain, right? In a way that is profound. How can you make their life better? That's the thing that you need to focus on, all right? So with that, right, starting with the market, right, and really understanding their pain points, right? What are the benefits? What's the story, right? starting the marketing now, not necessarily like Facebook ads or whatever, but as you're trying to figure out the features and so forth, in tandem with that, what's the positioning, right? What is the problem you're solving? And how do they talk about their pain? How do they talk about their needs? Because those are the words you're going to want to use when you're messaging to them, right? And thinking like being agile as you're like not just building features, but removing those barriers to discovery, to purchase, adoption, right? Removing friction and making it really easy for customers to buy and use your product. That's it. That's what I got.